So all this finally brings us to the four types of self-image that we can develop. The first two are the inaccurate self-images, right? These are the two that are whose representations of ourself is so far subtracted from the truth that we essentially become ineffective in life. But essentially, you've got the deflated self-image, which is basically just when you're a sorry little shit, you go about your life complaining, being sad, you just pay attention to all of your flaws, all your weaknesses. When you have a deflated self-image, you're focused much more on protecting yourself from all the harms of the world, and you care not for developing yourself or improving yourself. You don't take risks, you don't challenge yourself, you stay in a little safe bubble, afraid of freaking everything, and it sucks. The second is the self-image that we're going to look at in depth throughout this course, and that's the inflated self-image, which is basically the opposite. You think you're so great, you think you're all this and that you become blind to your mistakes, blind to your flaws, blind to your weaknesses, and so you go and make more and more mistakes, and all those flaws and those problems are able to corrupt far more aspects of your life than they would if you're aware of them. You start to take on challenges that you're not prepared for, and you do a lot of stupid shit. Then you have the accurate self-image, which is basically bringing that representation as close to your true self as possible, or at least as close as you need it to be for any endeavor that you're taking on. And to do that is going to require a lot of work, a lot of patience, a lot of thought process, a lot of reflecting, or a lot of thinking, and like science. It's going to be kind of like observing the world and trying to figure out how the hell it is that gravity actually works. And then, creating theories, and then testing those theories, and then looking at tangible results and using those tangible results to create new theories and to strategize for the future, and then find ways to use your findings to produce something useful, like using our better understanding of gravity to create phones that can communicate across the entire world. It takes a little bit more than just knowing gravity to do that, but you get the idea. Finally is going to be the most powerful type of self-image, but that's a secret for now. You're gonna have to get to the end of the course to see what that is, but it's gonna be one of the most useful ways to counteract pride and to approach the development of the self-image. That's going to protect us. That's going to be a much more long-term solution than this continual process of bringing our self-image towards our true self. I did a little change of scenery for this part of the lesson. Got a nice view up on this hill. So before we go into talking about the inflated self-image, I first want to look at the deflated self-image and the relationship that has with pride. Now, I think it's easy to kind of think, oh, what role would pride play in the deflated self-image? Because the deflated self-image is more focused on your flaws and your weaknesses, and pride is essentially moving you up towards that inflated self-image, which is exactly the opposite of that. But I think it's important to realize that pride has the ability to essentially take a deflated self-image and inflated self-image, and it comes from this appeal of the extremes. And you can think of it in a sense that people with a deflated self-image are more susceptible to the effects of pride, or to be deceived by pride. It's almost like there's an allergy to pride, and yet that allergen, which is pride, has not yet been introduced to the system. But as soon as it is, it causes a severe reaction. The reason this happens is essentially because with a deflated self-image, we tend to be very negative and focus more on our weaknesses. We don't acknowledge our strengths. We don't acknowledge the victories that we've had, if we've had any, and if we haven't had many, we've had a lot of failures, then we're going to have an even more deflated self-image. And it's pretty depressing. You have very low energy, high levels of anxiety. It's just not it. What's possible is that with a deflated self-image, you'll come into contact with some evidence of your strengths, or maybe you'll try something and that's outside of your comfort zone, and feel the sense of accomplishment, the sense of greatness almost. And it makes you aware of your strengths. And Perhaps memories of smaller victories throughout your life that you haven't been aware of due to your deflated self-image blinding you to them start to pop back into your mind. You go, oh, you know what? Maybe I am capable of a few things. And that's good. That's really good. And you start to capitalize on your strengths a bit more. You start to go outside of your comfort zone in a couple of ways, and you start to experience more and more accomplishments. As this happens, you become more and more focused on the positive aspects of yourself. Our focus on these more positive aspects of ourselves starts to bring much. We feel a lot healthier, and we start to feel all around better about ourselves, which is great. And because it becomes so much more pleasurable to think about these positive aspects that we weren't aware of for such a long time, we start to ignore the negative aspects. And there are a few things that happen. First, we want to hold on to some sense of certainty that those weaknesses won't resurface, because we associate the acknowledgement of those weaknesses with that depressive state. And so we kind of use rationalization to focus only on our strengths. We also want to maintain this new sense of self. And so part of that is making ourselves, kind of deceiving ourselves into believing that this new sense of self we have, we're now different than we used to be. We see those weaknesses that we used to acknowledge as part of our old self, and these new strengths that we've noticed as a part of the new self. And we create this separation when the reality is that our attention towards different aspects of ourselves has simply shifted. What then ends up happening is that our over focus on our strengths allows our lack of awareness of our weaknesses allows our weaknesses to manifest themselves without our ability to control them. And as this happens, we become less and less effective. More and more problems arise in our life, and we, out of our fear, ignore them and try to kind of suppress those realities. To cocaine, for example, I heard a story recently where basically, or actually a while back, and I don't remember who it was that I heard it from, but he was very addicted to cocaine. He had recovered from it, but before he started using cocaine, he had a very deflated self-image, very, low sense of self-worth. He placed very little value on himself. Eventually, when he was presented with the option to do cocaine, he freaking snorted a line, as most people do before they get addicted to cocaine. And he said he was in the school bathroom, and he looked up and he saw himself in the mirror. And this was, after snorting that line of cocaine, this was the first time he really felt that sense of self-worth. Now, obviously, it was just the cocaine speaking, but it wasn't so much the cocaine itself that he got addicted to. It was that sense of self-worth that cocaine kind of stimulated in his mind. And you'll hear similar stories among a lot of people, especially with cocaine and other uppers like amphetamines. They can cause you to shift your perspective on yourself to a much more positive perspective. And so when trying to recover or overcome a cocaine addiction, what you have to do is not necessarily just push through withdrawals, but is to move your self-image out of that deflated state, because then you're not as susceptible to the pleasurable emotions that come from looking at yourself through a positive lens. And this is exactly what pride does. Regardless of how you end up at a inflated self-image, whether that's you were in a state of deflated self-image and you swung to the other extreme, or you're just living your life and then one day we're like, you know what, I'm fucking awesome. Regardless, you're gonna suffer some fairly universal effects, but these universal effects are going to manifest themselves in everyone in a different way, and we'll be looking at that much more throughout the next part of this course. But just the general gist of how this works is that pride infiltrates the lens and it infiltrates your thinking, and by doing this, it makes you blind to your weaknesses. It overestimates your strengths and the value of your accomplishments, and it distorts your view of reality in a multiplicity of ways. It can make you believe, for example, you're views are stronger than they are, and when, you know, counter evidences are presented, it'll just discard them. And a part of this is because it's going to make you try and preserve this self narrative that you create. So if you're susceptible to being prideful of your intelligence, and your views are of course a part of that, and your self-image becomes tied to your views, you're going to become blind to the weaknesses of your views. And this identify how these effects are, or how pride is affecting you in your specific individual ways. A key part of this is that pride is going to create what we can call scary ideas, and scary ideas are basically just going to be anything that infringes on this self-narrative that you've imposed, or on this inflated self-image that you've fallen prey to. As a result of this, we become blind to our weaknesses, and so on. We essentially become blind to our true self. And as time progresses, it hurls us at our consequences, the consequences of which we are completely unaware of until they actually come and it's too late to deal with them. Before we go on to the next chapter, I think it would be useful for you to go and continue considering the way that the lens distorts people's realities, or their perceived realities, in others as well as in yourself. And instead of just looking at the overarching idea of the lens, try and look more specifically at pride and at how people's unawareness of their weaknesses, or your own unawareness of your weaknesses, have led to various problems throughout their life. You should also maybe consider certain experiences that may have instilled certain elements of that lens, and how pride might play a role in that process.
Howdy, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Conquering the Deadliest Sin. Check out more of these on my YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, comment if you have any thoughts about whatever the hell I talked about in this episode. Check out the other episodes in this series. It builds on itself, so I can go more in depth with certain concepts, certain topics, certain ideas than I would be able to in a quick 10 to 20 minute video. As you'll see throughout this series, a lot of the strategies that we're going to use to counteract pride involve developing self-awareness. Excellent way to do that is by journaling. Imagine if you could connect your journal to the mind of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. I made an app that allows you to do that. Essentially, you can go in, type in your reflections, regurgitate all the thoughts, all the ideas, all the experiences into your phone here, and then you'll be able to talk with a version of ChatGPT that's been connected to the meditations by Marcus Aurelius, as well as other Stoic texts such as On the Shortness of Life by Seneca, The Discourses by Epictetus, another book by Seneca, what was it? The Letters of a Stoic. So go ahead and check that out in the description. Get that app, give me a review, tell me what you think. Let me know if there are any features you would like to see, anything that you think should be added, any issues that you might find. I'm a solo app developer, kind of trying to figure it out on my own, and I would love any feedback from you guys that I could get. See you next time.